Farrell here to present.
Thank you. I'm John Redmond, Finance Director. This is Connie Garofalo. She's the Budget Director. And we are here for the first reading of the 3 budget resolutions concerning the 2014 budget. Believe it or not, the budget process starts in May, and it's probably over in May of 2015. So there's about a 24-month window here that we're involved with this thing, but we're happy to be where we are today. There's a number of people I'd like to thank. First to the board for your willingness to read and absorb massive amounts of data, and for your willingness to participate in many of the presentations that we've made. You've asked great questions. It really does make a difference. Thank you. To John Peacock for providing clear direction as to where the board or where the budget is going. That makes a huge difference. For your willingness to learn the nuts and bolts. That also makes a difference in your understanding of the budget. And for your participation in the presentation process. The Financial Advisory Board is out there. They help us set the revenue projections for the next 5 years. It's very nice to have a third party validate what we're thinking. To the many department heads, finance staff, and department level budget people. Believe it or not, there's over 40 budgets that are consolidated into this document. So there's a lot of people involved. And obviously, last but not least, Connie, who has been here from the beginning. I just would like to thank her for her attention to detail, her planful approach, her willingness to meet with literally everyone involved in this budget. It really makes a big difference in the quality of the product, and at the end of the day, it's a lot of just plain hard work on her part that makes this whole process seem so smooth. I think this year has probably been the best year yet for the budget process for us since I've been here, and I just kind of want you to know that your participation is really the key. It wouldn't look anything like it does without you. So, thank you. I think I will turn it over to Connie at this point. I think she'll review kind of where we stand. We'll talk about any changes since we last saw you, and after that we'll take some questions.
Are you thinking that you just go through one by one each resolution and discuss that and see if there's any questions and then move on to the next resolution?
No, I was going to go over the AIS first, the agenda item summary, and then see if you have questions on the resolutions as a whole.
And then, John, we'll need a motion for each resolution.
Yes, you'll need to adopt each resolution separately.
And the reason we're doing this in a special meeting today is because of the timing where this has to be finished by statute.
We need to have our mill levy certifications done by, I believe, the 20th at the latest, certified to the county, and so because we have a 2-reading process, and because we're a home rule county, unlike most counties, we have to have our first reading today so we can have our second reading prior to that mill levy certification.
So over the course of the fall, we presented conservative budget numbers and 5-year plans to the board. We do have conservative projections on our revenues. We have seen as the year has progressed in 2013 that 2 of our most risky areas of revenue, being the sales tax and community development fees, have actually come in a lot stronger than what we were originally projecting. Our sales tax through October is up 7.3% compared to 2012, and that is almost 2% over our 2013 budget. So, and sales tax makes up approximately 1/3 of our general fund revenues, so that's coming in better than we were expecting. Our community development revenues have been extremely strong, especially in the building inspection area. up over 50% more than our original projections for 2013. So we feel that the budget plan that we presented is conservative. The 5-year general fund operations has a surplus of over $1.2 million. So we feel that these budgets will give the county, make sure that we can sustain the services and programs that the county provides in the long run. There were a few changes to the budget numbers that we gave you at our last meeting at the end of November. Some of them are just minor adjustments as we got our final assessed valuations from the assessor's office. There are usually a few little changes, $100 here or there, as we're setting the exact mill levies and not just going off of projections. There was, however, one area where there was a more significant change, and that is in the Open Space and Trails Fund. As you know, Open Space and Trails has a fixed mill levy, which means that when property values go up, their revenues go up along with the property values, but when property values go down, then the revenues for open space also go down. The assessor's office gave us estimates in August, but then the final assessed valuations came in 0.6% lower than the August estimates. And so that's why we have about a $55,000 adjustment in the Open Space and Trails Fund with less revenue coming in. This does not create an impact on their services, as they were not budgeting to use all of their revenue. It just means that they have a little bit less in their fund balance. Our mill levies are set based on the 2013 valuations of property tax, and you can see in the attachment on page 11 of your packet. The mill levies, as they are set, provide over $23 million of property tax revenue to the different county funds. And at this point, I'd like to ask if you have questions on any of the budget resolutions, or if you would like me to go over the resolutions in more detail.
Let's see, again, let's maybe take this at one resolution at a time, just for simplicity. So the first, let me go back. The first resolution is summarizing expenditures for each fund, which Connie has given us a quick overview.
So the first resolution shows the total revenues budgeted for each of the county funds, and then the total expenditures budgeted for each fund. It shows whether we are using prior year surplus, using fund balance, or whether we are adding to that fund balance. And so as you go through line by line, you will see in the first section revenues, use of fund balance if that needs to be added to their revenues, transfers from other funds.
I'm sorry, what page are we on, Connie?
I'm sorry, page 4.
Page 4, okay, thanks.
So page 4, revenues for each fund, use of fund balance, and then transfers from other funds. And then we have expenditures in equal amounts, either expenditures, addition to the surplus, addition to fund balance, and transfers to other funds. And this sets both our revenue and our expenditure budgets for 2014.
Rob?
I have just kind of a general question, because I'm always amazed that we spend weeks and multiple meetings going through very in-depth financial statements for individual departments, and then in our resolution it's all of a sudden compact into this 2-page revenue and expenditures. And I spent a little bit of time last night going through the larger budget, seeing where stuff matched up and that sort of stuff. But in the end, we're passing a resolution with these larger numbers. How is it that the supporting documents become or don't become part of our budget? Meaning the 5-year plans or projections. Obviously, we're only budgeting for next year per state statute. And I have specifically question to one that's not really included in this, yet it's included in our packet today, which is a new thing this year, which is this pending buy-ups, which aren't budgeted, but they're kind of presented to us as this may happen. So how does that become part of our official plan, even though it's not in these resolutions? And I don't know if John should answer that, John Peacock, or...
all of those documents are a part of our plan, but they are not officially adopted by resolution. It's not law.
Yeah.
So it's all a part of our plan, though. It's a part of the information that we've given you and it sets the direction of where we as a county want to go. It shows the values of the services, the programs and projects that we feel are important, that the board has validated, that you support. And so it gives the whole plan for the individual departments, for the individual funds, of the direction that we intend to go in. But what is required by law to actually adopt officially are the whole budget numbers by fund. And then that's what we're legally accountable to.
So in essence, we kind of start the budget process at the 60,000-foot level, come down to this 10-foot level or 100-foot level, and then we go back to the 60,000-foot level to pass the resolution. But through the guidance of that budget process, the board has given direction to staff for that 100-foot level. And I think it's important for the public to kind of hear what that means, because we're not actually passing that every one of those dollars is going to be spent the way we want it, that we've set out in that lower level. We're passing a budget which is at that 60,000-foot level.
We're not adopting a resolution on a line-by-line basis that we intend to spend this many dollars on pencils and this much on this little, we pass it on a fund level. But then when we do have changes, we come back to the board during the year. If there's a transfer of funds over a certain dollar amount or between funds, then those changes come back to the board for official changes, and then all of the budget documents set the policy and the direction and the guidance.
And I think in addition, in years past, we've had people come in the first quarter of the year looking for particular items. And I think everyone is saying, well, where were you in the fall? And I think for the conditionals, it's more about get them in, let's at least discuss them. We're not approving them, we're giving you a chance to review them. And then we'll be back if they actually come up as something real. They'll be approved just as this budget has been approved. So it's a little bit more of a heads up, and so there aren't so many surprises.
Yeah, the board spends quite a bit of time looking at the detailed plans, which we appreciate. But the truth is, you could have just looked at these line items and approved those in one meeting and met your legal requirement. But I think both for the organization to really connect with the policy direction that the board has as far as what we should be doing. I often say that budgets are as much about the authoritative allocation of values as they are about the numbers that are actually in them. And so having the more in-depth discussions gives the board an opportunity to weigh in as to whether our plans are in the right direction, in conformance with the overall goals and desires of the board, and you have an opportunity at that point to change direction. The board does have the option to adopt budgets at a line item level. Some boards do that. It tends to not be a very good way to run. It provides very, very little flexibility for your staff to address needs as they come up. We tend to adopt at a little bit higher level, which most actually counties and municipalities do. Very few adopt at that line item level. But we do track and can report back to you at that line item level, so we can say, look, we thought we were going to need $15 for these kinds of supplies, but this year we needed $30, but over here where we thought we needed $100, we actually only needed 70, so we managed between that. And so that's the level that you're adopting the budget at. The board, though, holds the staff accountable for achieving the results, the large-scale results that we've promised to deliver through this budget process and through the direction that we receive from you throughout the year. And so you get to hold us accountable both on our financial performance, but also on the outcomes that we're achieving for the community and whether those are in conformance with what we've laid out as the objectives as we've gone through all these discussions. But yeah, the truth is you could go through this very quickly just at this fund level, but we appreciate that the board has spent the extra time to give us guidance.
And I think it's also valuable to note that the quarterly meetings, the quarterly updates that we get are very informative. We have the opportunity to see if there are any variances either from the revenue or expenditure side, and if need be, make those adjustments as John has just said. So that's valuable. And I think, I don't know, John, if this is unusual for Pickens County, where we also are looking at a 5-year budgetary plan, which is probably a little unusual, but that 5-year plan, that allows us to continue to look on a longer range, the financial health of the organization while still addressing the strategic plan that we've got in place.
That's right, and it is, some organizations and public sector organizations do multi-year plans. Some only do multi-year plans for their capital and equipment replacement. Some do it for operations, but I'd say it's a minority of public sector organizations that are doing the 5-year planning the way we are. For the public's sake, the board only appropriates formally or provides authority to expend formally for 1 year at a time, but we have a 5-year outlook so we can see what the impacts of our decisions today are in 5 years on operations, and we actually plan 10 years out on the capital side.
Yeah. Let's see your hand up, Steve.
Yeah. I'm glad we sort of take the big picture. I've talked to some county commissioners, and their big discussions are what brand of motor grader are they going to buy that year or not buy. So I'm glad that we're kind of above that level. Between the November 26th and today's, there's minor differences like on expenditures and revenues, and I can understand some of the revenue things, but on the expenditures, are you like continually tweaking the numbers to come up with the most accurate one? Does that explain those minor differences?
You know, we are kind of always tweaking very small things. However, in the general fund, the expenditures should not have changed in the general fund. In other funds, they change because they have treasurer's fees, which are a % calculation on the property tax. So if the property tax changes because of the assessed valuation, then that 5% treasurer fee will also adjust just slightly too. And so we get a change both on the revenue side with the property tax, the motor vehicle ownership tax, and then on the expenditure side with the treasurer's clearing fees. And so that's why you do see those minor changes as we're getting the most accurate final numbers into the budget.
Okay.
In most cases, these are very small changes and don't present any change in the direction of the budgets and the projects or the programs. It's just tweaking the numbers kind of down.
Yeah, and I wasn't
detail.
concerned about it. It's only like $3,500 or something grand total on an $82 million expenditure.
Right.
But I was just curious why, just so I understand the process.
Yes, it's mainly due to the treasurer's fees and the expenditures.
Okay.
Rachel?
And am I correct that at our next regular meeting on the 18th, we would then be certifying the mill levy from the other taxing districts within Pickens County that we collect for?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll hear those later. And then because of, I guess, the nature of doing a special improvement district or public improvement district, this is what the Redstone Ranch acres and the Twining Flats are. They're kind of subdivisions of the state. But they manage their own money, would be the best way to say it, as a homeowners group. we didn't review their budgets, that's what I can think I
Right.
could say that safely.
We're engaged at some level sometimes. If there's a plow guy that is, we get an invoice for plowing for I think 20 flats, we will wind up paying that for them.
Their fund.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, just because the name seemed different to me, the Public Health Fund, that is the mill levy support for Health and Human Services?
No, the Public Health Fund is just a pass-through fund. A while back, the state changed the way community health receives its money, and it needs to pass through Picken County.
Okay, so that goes directly to our community health.
Right.
We may want to put parens behind that, community health, if that's what it's to, because I was a little confused there.
Okay.
And then the Conservation Trust Fund, is that the Parks and Recreation?
The lottery,
That's a lottery, when they pass lottery funds through to us. Okay, that'd be worth putting lottery fund in parens behind it.
okay.
Thanks so much.
Any other questions on the budget, revenues and expenditures? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to approve at first reading, and again set for public hearing on December 18th.
I'd move to approve the resolution summarizing revenues and expenditures for each fund and adopting a budget for Pitkin County, Colorado for the calendar year 2014.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll just say that I believe that this budget reflects the county going in the right direction, adapting to the recovering economy that we're seeing nationwide and certainly locally, as you've talked about with the increase in our sales taxes and ComDev, which shows that the building is coming back. But at the same time, I believe this budget also reflects a very fiscally responsible and conservative approach. So with that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so next is the appropriating sums of money to the various funds. And we've had a discussion on that. And that is, what page was that on
So
again?
this is on page 7 of your packet, and the numbers are the same expenditure numbers as you see on page 5, but this resolution is the official appropriation of these monies, giving the authority to spend those monies to the different funds.
Okay, any questions on that?
I'd move to approve a resolution appropriating sums of money to the various funds for Pitkin County, Colorado 2014 budget year.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. And last is levying of general property taxes for the year 2013 to help defray the costs of government. And what page would this be on, Connie?
That is on page 9. Page 9 through 11.
So can you explain, as our assessed values in the county have gone down, we have the ability to adjust our mill levy, to give a credit, temporary credit, or back, and so what are we doing in this case on some of these funds?
So on, excuse me, so on page 11, there's a table that summarizes the different parts of the mill levy. And so for the general fund, we start out with a mill levy of 3.077. In past years, we have taken temporary mill levy reductions so that we can stay within Tabor, so that the amount that the taxpayers are paying only goes up by the rate of growth in the base of properties and by the rate of inflation. And so we continually have reduced our mill levy in order to not collect more tax than what we are allowed to collect. So that means that as the property tax values have increased, in some cases by very large percentages, our property tax has kept kind of a slow and steady pace of growth. And there's a gap between the values of the houses, the properties, and the amount that we collect in the property tax. So when there is a downturn in values, as we've seen over the last few years, we're able to take back some of those temporary reductions that we gave in the past so that we can still keep our property tax level still at the level of growth and inflation. So we maintain our same trajectory of that steady, slow growth in property tax, even though the values can have bigger swings up or down. Now, with open space and trails or other entities that have fixed mill levies, they follow the same trajectory as the property values. When there are large increases in values, their tax collections go up by the same amount. But then when there's a downturn, they also lose that revenue and their property taxes go down.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Steve?
Yeah, I was confused by the wording, because the wording made it sound like because the valuation went down by 6%, therefore the state constitution mandated that we lower our mill levy, which would mean we would collect less money.
Well, for open space and trail, well, no, it's just the value. So, no, the mill levy doesn't go down. It's just we're actually raising the mill levy back up a little bit closer to what it originally was.
Recapturing a little bit that
Right.
had been not allowed to raise in
That's
recent
correct.
years. So last year, at this time, what was the gross mill levy figure from a year ago?
Let's see, I believe that's in the 2012 net mill levy column, which is 2.396. And then further towards the right, there's the total 2013, which is 2.416.
Okay, net, so those minor differences would have to do with regaining a little bit that had been...
Right, and then there's
foregone
also
before.
abatements that get calculated in. When abatements are given, we are allowed to recuperate what was lost in abatements.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I always have to like double take on this chart. So I'm going to try to say a few things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really, again, for the public that may be listening in. When we talk about the 2013 mill levy, it's really assessing the taxes that are going to be collected in 2014, which is the last column. Even though they're collected in 2014, they are the property taxes that are due for the ownership of that property during the 2013 year.
Right.
So that's important to understand the years here. For instance, the 2012 mill levy is the formula that's set to collect property taxes in 2013. Those property taxes are collected for the property that was owned in 2012. So I think that's an important thing to understand on this. The mill levies, I think you gave a good explanation. I'm a little bit, if you could explain the open space and trails, because the open space and trails went from a 2012 mill levy of 3.75 to 3.783, and what's the Tabor calculation that happens for that to raise? Because not only is the valuation change how they can collect, but now they're collecting a higher mill levy as well. And I thought that they had kind of maxed their mill levy.
That is only due to abatements.
It's due to abatements that you're collecting a
Right.
higher amount.
Right.
Because there's nothing credited back in open space and
That's
trails
right.
at this point.
That's right.
They've collected, they've reassessed everything that they've credited in the past. I think 2 years ago, they brought it up to the top amount.
So, yeah, and I see some confusion. So, historically, when property values were going up and the Open Space and Trails Fund wasn't subject to that Tabor restriction that bring it down like it did in the general fund,
Yeah.
there was a voluntary reduction that the board approved. Rob, I think your point is that voluntary reduction was taken back
Correct.
in last year's budget, and so if they're at the ceiling, how could their mill levy actually be going up? And as Connie said, that's because of the abatements, making up for the abatements.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everyone? So there's really two steps, and over multiple years, it can be a little confusing to keep track of them all.
So the abatements allow us, based on what they are, allow us to keep that level of growth.
Right. Basically, it's saying that in 2013, we're not collecting as much as we should have collected.
Yeah.
And so we can make up the difference in 2014.
Gotcha.
Just to piggyback off that, I always try to present this information because I think it's really important when people question where and how their tax dollars go, specifically to Pickens County, because as we know, Pickens County is responsible for sending out the tax bill and for collecting those dollars, but when you look at their tax bill, you'll see a wide assortment of different districts that we then distribute those dollars to. So in the case of the general fund, which is sort of the general operations of the county, in fact, for property owners, we collect less than 6 cents for every dollar
Around 6
collected in property taxes. So a very, very small portion of your tax dollars ends up going to the general fund of the county. And similarly, as you said, with sales taxes, which represents about a third of our budget, we end up, for the county, collecting probably less than a penny for every dollar spent.
We collect 2 cents, but we share most of it back to the municipalities, so it works out to
0.86.
0.86. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really always an important point I try to get out to the public when they question, where do my tax dollars go and how come I'm paying so much in taxes? The reality is the public is contributing a very small portion of their total tax bill or sales taxes to the county.
I mean, you look at it and, like, perhaps they're an anomaly, but Twining Flats General Improvement District Fund is 6.82 mills. You know, so that's more than our general fund mill, road and bridge mill, human service fund, TV, FM translator, healthy community fund combined. Now, if you threw open space and trails in there, it's almost the same. And that's probably for their water, sewer, snow plowing, trash removal, things like that.
Yeah. Any other questions on this item?
No. Do you accept a motion, George?
Yes.
I move to approve a resolution levying the general property taxes for the year 2013 to help defray the cost of government for Pickens County, Colorado, and its special districts for the 2014 budget year.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you, and we'll see you
Is
next
there a
week.
third resolution, or did we do all three?
Just all three. And we'll see you next week for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are you going to keep your special meeting open until later?
No, I'll adjourn our special meeting at this point.
Reconvene.
So we're a little ahead of schedule, which is good.
Well, yeah, with budget, it's been a trend lately. So it may be good, we could jump ahead and do future agendas, maybe some open discussion items. And that'll probably put us right in to our recycle update.
Okay.
So, just a few things on future agendas. First, next week's schedule looks to be changing a little bit. We've gotten some feedback on our CMAQ grants that we're going to need to do some more work with the federal agency granting those before we bring that to you for approval, so we'll be taking that off. And the library has indicated they don't think they're going to need their full 2 hours, and so I was going to propose starting you guys at 1 o'clock and going over the recycle bids, a little bit less time on the library renovation, and frankly, we haven't really been taking that full hour and 45 minutes on memos of interest and open discussion, although we will have the survey discussion, which will be probably a little bit longer. on the 17th, but if the board is open to it, I think we can probably move that schedule around and start you a little bit later, which may make up for what's going to happen to you on the next day, on the 18th, your last meeting of the year, which, if you flip forward, is very busy.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we're going to try to have an exec meeting on January 7th, but is there any need to do any exec meeting, some of the things we didn't get done today?
You know, I could check in with John. We could certainly
Have a brown bag working lunch and start at noon.
start at noon with an exec and try and make up some of those. That may be a good idea also, I think.
Yeah, because while on that, I'd like to schedule an exec. It could be for January 7th. We're going to have an exec anyway, but as part of that, a discussion with Dale Will with Open Space regarding acquisitions.
Okay.
So I don't know, he may need about an hour, so if we can knock off some of the things with John Ely, next Tuesday, John Ely usually has other things as well, so.
Yeah. And that, as you can see, we don't currently have an executive session scheduled on the 7th. That is a little bit lighter agenda, and so we're going to move our prep for the Eagle County meeting, which was under MOIs, to the 7th, and also schedule an exec to have some of the acquisition items and such on there. So obviously that agenda needs some work at this point.
So I'd like Rachel's suggestion to the board, is if it works for John Ely, and to perhaps start at noon next Tuesday with a working lunch for an hour with exec.
It's fine.
That'd be fine.
While we're on the 7th, I'm not sure that we're going to need a full hour for board appointments and chair and vice chair seats. That's usually about a 20-minute conversation.
It's varied. It's sometimes it's taken longer and sometimes it's been short. So we could certainly shorten that up. I think you guys have.
It may have taken a little longer last time because we had a new commission.
Yeah. So yeah, we can shorten that up.
While we're on the 7th, we were discussing having a little more time allocated with the Forest Service.
Yeah, and we're still touching base with them on their schedule.
Okay. John?
On today's cover sheet, we've got this Monday meeting regarding the Independence Pass fines. Is there more information on that? Is that an FYI? Is that
It's
a...
a FYI.
It's more of an FYI. We talked about the last meeting. Rachel and Steve are going to be representing the board. I was going to talk a little bit about it in open discussion to talk about the specifics that we've learned and what we're preparing. But there is a meeting on the 16th. We haven't gotten confirmation from all the key players yet, so we still need to see if that date is going to stick for everyone. I think we're going to get together with whoever can show up at that point. I think Senator Schwartz is going to be able to at least attend by telephone, and I haven't heard the latest on the RSVPs. We're having that meeting in Eagle County. The purpose of the meeting is to bring the stakeholders together, which would be obviously the legislators sponsoring the bill in the House and the Senate, as well as other concerned parties. So we've invited the Motor Carriers Association, State Patrol representatives from our Sheriff's Department to talk about the proposed legislation and why Pickens County is proposing it.
Yeah, and our CCI lobbyists.
And our CCI lobbyists, thank you, Tony Lombard. This will probably lead to another discussion, potentially. So we'll have to see what happens in that meeting.
See if there's opposition or...
Yeah, I would assume that the Motor Carriers Association will have some concerns about it. And I think we're prepared to discuss those. But maybe when we get to open discussion, I can talk a little bit about what the latest is that we've learned.
Okay. Future agenda still? Well,
And it seems to have dropped off, but I am out the entire week of the 21st, 22nd. So it's on the 22nd, but it's not on the 21st.
On the 21st, yeah, I'm not
I
sure.
think it was on the last one.
Okay, we'll make sure that gets added back. I know we had it on there.
okay. John, did you have anything else on future agendas?
I don't.
We've sort of been moving around a little bit. Anybody else have anything for future agendas?
Yeah, just some small things. But the Colorado River Basin 1177 Roundtable Group, in order to meet the state-imposed deadlines for a water plan, is going to be meeting on Monday, December 30th. First time anyone said they'd never scheduled a meeting between Christmas and New Year's, but they didn't want to do it Christmas week, which is the usual fourth Monday of the month when they do it. So there will be a meeting in Glenwood Springs at noon for the 1177, if anybody would like to attend that. I think I've already mentioned that depending on the weather and how late we get out on the night of the 18th, I need to drive to Denver for a 9:30 a.m. meeting the next morning, the 19th. So I will have very short commissioner comments that day. And then in terms of other future meetings you might want to have on the agenda, January 23rd and 24th will be the regular CCI legislative meetings in Denver. And the February 20th and 21st will be the CCI meetings in Denver. And then March 20th and 21st will be the CCI meetings in Denver. So those are kind of going a little far out, but just so Phyllis has those.
Well, and Rachel, I think it'd be good to get guidance from you or Steve as we go along, whether we need any representation from staff on, for example, the Independence Pass
Yeah,
bill.
and this is just their standard policy group
Okay,
meetings. Those are
okay.
not, we have no idea when any of this is going to be calendared yet for
Okay.
hearings, but
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
I would think, I mean, that's going to depend on when the legislature is having their committee meetings is
Right.
probably when we'll need somebody there testifying.
And that can be
It's
kind of hellacious. You can
unpredictable.
head down there and think you have a hearing and then cancel it by the time you get there the next morning, or
Yeah.
suddenly they've put it on for a Thursday and you get less than 24 hours notice to testify. But we'll see how that goes. And then Monday, February 17th is going to be the next IBCC meeting, the Interbasin Compact Committee meeting, and I believe that's Monday, February 17th was the date that worked. So those are the only upcoming calendar things that I know of for the board. I guess it's worth noting that the Club 20's annual Denver legislative session is like Thursday the 30th of January and the 31st, and those fall at the exact same time as the Water Congress meeting in Denver on the 30th and 31st. So if someone wanted to attend an opposite set of meetings than myself, go to the Club 20 when I go to the other, whatever would be fine. And Club 20 is going to make their spring meeting, which is the very end of March, not to keep jumping around too much, but March 28th and 29th will be the kind of spring meeting, and the 29th is the Saturday educational forums and everything, and they're going to make water part of the main focus of that session, so that they can inform their members about what's going on with the statewide water plan.
Okay, is that it for future agendas? Okay, why don't we go back to open discussion?
Sorry, one last, I should put this out here because there is a conflict for me, but on March 6th, this is a big date.
March 6th, that's like a year away right
No, that's right around the corner, George. March 6th is going to be the all 1177 Roundtable Basins meeting in Denver. And I will probably still be in Washington, D.C. with NACO at that point and not able to attend. But the all basin roundtable meeting is a big one. They do that once a year, and they didn't do it last year for various reasons.
Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes. We go back to open discussion.
Yeah,
Pick up the
I think
conversation.
from a staff perspective, we've got 3 or 4 items. I know John has a letter that I'll probably regret saying this, I think is a brief discussion, we'll see.
That probably isn't, but let's,
Probably isn't.
because we can come back for open discussion again.
Right.
So let's let's continue with the conversation that Rob brought up in terms of the
Independence Pass?
Independence Pass first.
Okay. So we're working on a presentation that is almost ready to distribute to all of you. What we've learned that is a little bit of a change is that the legislation is a standalone bill. I think we had originally thought it was an omnibus that is going to be added on to another piece of legislation. In fact, it does look like it's a standalone bill. Right now, it really has two changes in it that we're seeing. One is a statewide change where the proposed legislation raises the fine for the operator of commercial vehicles who violates a road closure or road restriction, and it increases that fine from $500 to $2,000. And when the violation of a restriction results in the closure of a lane, it goes up to $2,500 and 2 points. So that would apply to any restriction that would affect oversized, overweight vehicles, chains. It's not specific to Independence Pass. Additionally, the bill states that a person who violates restrictions while operating a commercial vehicle on State Highway 82 between U.S. Route 24 and the city of Aspen is subject to a penalty of $2,500 and a surcharge of $156, and that's unique to our restriction. So it's actually a little bit high. They're increasing the penalty, it looks like, for all passes, and there's an enhanced penalty on top of that for Independence Pass. I think our expectation was that the bill would just apply to Independence Pass, so we still have to clarify that.
So does that mean also that for Independence Pass specifically, the fine is $2,500 plus surcharge plus points?
Yes, that's how it's written.
Yeah, okay.
So it's pretty steep. So we have to confirm this is a draft bill at this point, and it appears that maybe we got an early draft of the bill, and so we still need to confirm that this is the language in the most recent draft. Like I said, I think the two things that were new to us were, one, that it was a standalone piece of legislation, and second, that there were penalties increased for areas outside of Independence Pass, which was our area of concern when we raised it.
Yeah, we have to really, as John said, check in to see where did that larger increase or expanding the bill to all state roads penalties come from? Was this a recommendation from the Transportation Commission? Is it from the two commission representatives who are going to be sponsoring? We just really don't know where that came from. And, in particularly as we lobbied for CCI support to make this part of their legislative agenda, it was presented as being narrow to Independence Pass only. And so, it's hard to say, do we have the full support of that organization going forward if it's all these roads? And it has really kind of upped the ante. We were meeting with the Motor Carriers Association very much as a courtesy call to discuss the legislation and see what their concerns are and so on. And so we are very prepared, I would say, in coming up to speed on how to present Pittman County's case quite well. But we're not prepared to present the case on statewide roads. And if that is the case, then there really should be a lot more partners in at the table, and preparing support for this. So, we just have to find out where that's coming from. Is that something that's been thought of as part of a negotiation strategy? So there's, something to drop? Is it been part of a, effort to give them a heads up that, these are going to come down the pike at some point? We're having some real compliance problems. Where it backed off to increasing them from 500 to 750 and let it go at that. It's really hard for us to know what the back game is right on.
Yeah, I would encourage you, when you go over to MECO, at least to hold steadfast to our concerns in the fines that are being proposed for Independence Pass. And the state discussion needs to be put off or separated out. But I don't want to see that deter what I think we've got a good groundswell movement to get some legislation passed this year to hopefully address this issue that
Very
this
localized.
public safety issue on Highway 82 Independence Pass.
And I think, as you'll see when we distribute the materials we're putting together, we've got a very compelling case for Independence Pass, and we've got nothing outside of Independence Pass at this point. Doesn't mean that evidence doesn't exist and that there's not a need. Don't know that, but right now we focused all of our efforts and information on Independence
Yeah,
Pass.
'cause I hate to see, as you said, we don't know, I hate to see this sort of get wrapped into somewhat of an omnibus bill that if there's some parties that are not going to support that entire bill, that we lose the ability to address Independence Pass.
Right, I agree, we agree, you know.
Yeah, but I think the motor carriers, because it has broader implications, they're probably really going to be upset and trying to reduce the penalties or eliminate the extra penalties or something that could jeopardize the whole Independence Pass thing too.
Yeah, I think where you really get into persuasiveness with the legislature is going to be basically, you know, farm vehicles, hauling vehicles for stock and things like that, and say, wait a second, these penalties could put a small producer out of business for making a simple mistake, you know, and there's a lot of sympathy for ag needs and ag concerns down there, and, you know, but it's not as if we're seeing agricultural trucks go over the pass, you know, hauling cattle. That's not happening, but that would be your, you know, what you'd see, you know, concerning your front range legislators and all. And so we just really don't know yet how or why it's part of this larger.
So, we've got to confirm, you know, whether this is the latest draft or not, and what the intent is. As far as our arguments for Independence Pass, we're focusing on what you'd expect. We're starting off with the public safety concerns. We've got, you know, good information on the tight corners and the narrow lane widths, the steep grades, the fact that there's no runaway truck ramps, the fact that there's no cellular service and there's an extended response time, focusing on those sorts of things. And we go to the next level of concerns, which are really having to do with, you know, the inadequate road base and the subsidence that we're seeing on the Lake County side, user conflicts with increased bicycle use and recreational use, and environmental concerns. So that's really where we're focusing our information. It's very specific to Independence Pass. I think it's a compelling case, and so that's what we're going to bring to this meeting on the 16th and see where it goes.
Yeah, we've talked to the Lake County Commissioners about a letter, and I don't know that we have formally talked to the City of Aspen about a letter,
We have
but we
not.
should. I think I at least received an email from Adam Frisch saying, you know, this is way to go, really well needed, you know, let us know if we can help. And so I think that we, you know, certainly should be able to pull a letter from Aspen together, and, you know, perhaps no mass for that matter. Anything that inhibits, you know, someone's ability to come over and enjoy our area as a whole, or say they want to avoid that route in the future, you know, I think that affects the region's tourisms, you know, not just Aspen directly.
Yeah, I mean, it could also be noted that Independence Pass has been designated as a national scenic byway as well.
Yeah, I wasn't sure of that.
It was, yeah, several years ago it was designated.
We certainly should add that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, good.
Okay.
All right, so I think we'll keep the open discussion remaining as scheduled for about 2:30, because we're right about ready to go on to our 2 o'clock presentation.
Can we take a 4-minute break then, George, before we...
So you can take a 4-minute break.
4.5.
He's always extra generous.
So grassroots, we're on about a short break here. GR, is Mirta coming over? Do you know? Next on the agenda is a recycle annual update. And we have, who do we have here? We've got Mirta, Mallory, GR.
Thanks. Thanks, George. I'm G.R. Fielding, I'm the county engineer. I'm here today with Mirta Mallory. Did Lizzie make it? Yes, Lizzie. And Richard, all from WeCycle, to go through what they saw in their first year of operation of the first rural bike share in the country. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mirta.
Fantastic. Hello, everyone, and thanks for talking bikes on a wintry day. I'm going to switch spots with GR here just so I can flip through these perhaps a little bit more smoothly. Fantastic, thanks. What has been? So in June, Layla Hood was here to help us inaugurate the first real bike share program of the country, and Layla Hood was the former Secretary of Transportation. Let's see, how can we...
Just hit page down.
Yeah. George, you want to hit the light?
There's the little hand thing.
It's not
How
a
do we
PDF.
get
It's a
full
PDF.
screen? Oh, here we go.
Oh, gotcha.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, perfect. Excellent. So thank you all for having the foresight, the vision, and taking the risk to help participate and bring this program to fruition. Thanks to you, we have 13 solar-powered stations and 100 bicycles that comprised Aspen's launch. We launched on June 5th with a parade of 100 bicycles riding through town. And the summer continued in the spirit of the parade with smiles, enthusiasm, energy, adoption, curiosity, and lots of riding. And the exciting part is those smiles through bike sharing are able to translate into a measurable impact. And we are thrilled that we had over 10,000 rides in our first year and over 23,000 miles pedaled. And those rides were made by 2,100 distinct riders. So those are unique riders who made up those trips. So, and collectively, we burned some calories in the process, but one of the exciting figures is our carbon offset. And so showing just under 16,000 pounds of carbon offset. What that does not calculate are the multimodal trips that are made in conjunction with bike share, which we found a lot of. Individuals riding the bus into town, so thereby saving a car trip, and then riding the bike home, or riding a bike into town and taking the bus for the rest of their trips. And as a result, we're not able to calculate that, but we're really pleased with the number that we do have. In our inaugural season, again, we were the first program, so we were really setting the benchline for other communities to see how we were going. All eyes were on us, and we were the 34th in the country. When we launched in June, we were the 34th. By the end of the summer, there were 3 or 4 more programs that had come online. So in our 151 days of operating, our busiest day was in the middle of June as part of Aspen Ideas Festival, and we had 373 rides. But our average trip rides were about 66 a day if you average out the entire season. So the good question is that successful? How does that measure? What's exciting from this graph is bike sharing tends to measure its success on average rides per day per bicycle in order to take the variability of program sizes out of it. And as you see here, Chicago launched in July, and they have about 4 rides per day. On the other end, Fort Worth launched this summer in May. They have less than 0.5 rides per day per bicycle. So Aspen is right in the middle, which is really encouraging to see that we are on par with a lot of major cities in terms of our ridership and our adoption. What's also encouraging is that Denver was about where we were in its first year, and they had a 97% increase in ridership in their second year and over 105% more miles traveled. So we have a lot to look forward to, but also really pleased with having started off very strong. And with broad appeal as well, what's really encouraging is that our bike system is being used by our locals. 75% of our season pass holders, those are individuals with the WeCycle key, have 81611 or 12 zip codes, which is really staggering, and they made up 51% of our rides. So, and their rides were shorter. They're more familiar with the system. They're using it for errands, for commuting, as part of their, maybe for work. Whereas by contrast, our 24-hour, 3-day, and 7-day pass holders were 49% of our ridership, and their rider time, as you can see, is a little bit longer. Together, they made up a broad variety of riders, including our state senator, Gail Schwartz, who used one of our bikes this summer. You were part of pioneering transit this entire summer with the launch of Velociraptor, the first rural BRT system in consort with the first bike share system in a rural community. And our system has done nothing but prove it's a transit system with 91% of our rides under 30 minutes. And just like Ruby Park is a transit hub for buses, it was our transit hub as well, our busiest station by far with origination and departure of bikes. It all comes down, however, to location, location, location. As you can see, Ruby Park was not only our busiest, but also centrally located. Stations that were most successful were those that were near residential neighborhoods, business neighborhoods, or events and destinations. So the Aspen Institute and Aspen Meadows stations proved to be very strong, even surprisingly so through the fall months as well. And the outskirt stations are a little bit more challenging in that they are point-to-point stations. They don't necessarily connect with other stations, so people are clearly riding to the hospital, not between other stations. And in order for all of these rides to be so successful, safety was our #1 priority throughout the entire season. And we are so pleased to have completed our 10,000 rides without any injuries. We only had to close the system for 4 hours in the middle of October because the roads were too icy. And one of the reasons that our system operated so smoothly and safely is because we purchased the best infrastructure and bikes around. They were serviced every 30 days completely by our staff. They were cleaned every 3 days. And Aspen and Picken County have invested significantly in bike infrastructure over the years. And so by having laid that groundwork of bike trails, bike paths, bike lanes, and bike shadows, there's a familiarity with bikes, motorists are aware of them, and that was even more reiterated this summer with such a strong safety record. But that safety record was only accomplished through the endless, tireless work of our team, 2 of whom are with us today. Lizzie Grader, our program manager, worked endless hours, had the phone by her bedside for the 24/7 helpline, which we staffed the entire season. And Richard Rosenfeld, the chair of our board, helped spread the word, encourage people to use the system, try it, riding themselves, and really creating an enthusiasm behind the program. So we didn't have 8 full-time team members, but we had to staff the program 24/7, and as a result, we had 2 operations team members, we had an operations manager, we had summer interns, and we had balancers. You probably saw the bike moving around throughout the summer, moving bikes to where they needed to be so that people wouldn't end up at a station without bicycles. We also had a little balancing vehicle that would move greater numbers of bikes when needed, and so needed constant vigilance because the bike share program is a living organism, and so it took a lot of attentive individuals putting an extreme amount of work into making it successful and run smoothly. But we had a tremendous amount of community support as well. Our Adopt a Bike partners, our partners and collaborators, those who did it in trade, in kind, partnerships in all different capacities, volunteered for the program, and I'll run through them quickly. As we know, our founding partners helped buy the capital infrastructure and start our program. Sotheby's came on as our title sponsor. We had a broad range of representation within our community and in Colorado in terms of our sponsorship. Our media sponsors, collaborators who participated in kind or in partnership capacities. And there's some fun things that come out of it too. Of note, 55% of our program, of our season pass holders were male, and the sign of a mature bike community is 50-50, and we are really close to that, which speaks to the years of bike infrastructure and bike culture that we have in this community. I wanted to highlight the Aspen Valley Hospital, who was the only partner to create a wellness program around the bikes. They had 25 individuals who were signed up, and they put in competitions, and they measured their impact, and they saw how many rides they could accomplish as a community, and we hope that as a group, and we hope we can do more of that next year. And of course, their request for more stations, and ABC was highly requested as well, and so we were starting to look at clearly where stations are and make an impact on who's riding the bikes as well. So now let's do some fun numbers. Whoops. Not quite sure what happened here. But a quick overview of the numbers. Our operational revenue comes from sponsors, from day passes sold, and from rides that incurred trip fees. So because such a high percentage of our rides were under 30 minutes, we only had 893 rides that actually even got to that trip fee, which clearly decreased our revenue, but was our goal, which was to have not have rides over 30 minutes. We were also very fortunate in that Sotheby's came on as our title sponsor, and a huge portion of our momentum, enthusiasm, and buy-in this year came from events as well. And our partnership with CH2M Hill and the Aspen Ideas Festival was tremendous in creating buy-in Also giving individuals from major cities the opportunity to try biking in our community and then go back and try it in theirs. We had several people who said, I'm going to go become a Hubway member or a Capital Bike Share member. And so we're really pleased with that as well. And so how did that all pan out? We broke even. We are so thrilled. It took, we ran a very tight ship, and we partnered wherever possible. We are most grateful for the in-kind, the trade that allowed us to, and the hard work of all of our team to allow us to really keep this program lean and efficient, and to prove that it works. Because bike sharing is sustainable. And we have now paid off our capital. We are very close to paying off the capital investment of our system, which has a 10 to 15-year lifespan. So we now have this system, which works beautifully, looks as good as new, and it will roll out next May. And we have endless opportunities for growth, for partnership, for synergies. And bike sharing one tends to see, as I mentioned with Denver, that there tends to be a 2 to 3-fold increase in ridership in its second year, and we're really looking forward to taking advantage of that momentum. Were there challenges? Of course. And we rolled out in June. We didn't have a product to sell. No one knew what it was going to look like. So it was hard trying to sell the sponsorship space. So we had leftover sponsorship space, which we were able to thank our founding partners, as we did here. Explaining the system was challenging. What is bike share? How does it work? What do you mean I can only use it for 30 minutes? Where are your stations? So we dedicated 100% of our energy to trying to improve and facilitate the rider experience. And did we meet our projections? We exceeded them in so many ways. One of our riders was able to sell his car thanks to WeCycle. Mitzi, was a tentative biker. She hadn't ridden in years, and she became one of our avid WeCyclers, using it, perhaps coming into town. And one of the great stories is I never expected a bike shop to approach me and ask me to put a bike station right in front of their store because we're good for their business. Did we meet our numbers projections? What were our numbers? The industry is so young. When we were making our projections, it was within the first year of bike share. We had basically one model to look at. Now there are 37, 38 programs in the country. The fleet size is expected to grow in the next year, and we're now part of telling that story of what are the benchmarks and what are the projections that other programs can have. And we're getting calls very often of, how did it go? What can we learn from you? So what's next? We'll be opening in May of next year, and as soon as the snow melts, we're eager to get on the ground to create more enthusiasm and ridership. But that's all my story. I'd like my riders to tell you a little bit more about how they felt this season. Let's see if I can find this video. Maybe right here.
Well, whoever's been doing your photography has done a great job. You got some great pictures to go with your PowerPoint. There you go. You got your volume on?
Might need to turn those speakers on.
WeCycle's awesome. First of all, the fact that we have a bike share program in Aspen is just unbelievable.
This is the year of bike share. I'm so pleased to be in Aspen to help with the inauguration of one of the best bike share programs in the country.
Riding WeCycle makes me feel awesome, gives you that freedom and the flexibility in this town where there's no parking.
I use WeCycle to get to work and to run errands while I'm at work, and then I use WeCycle to go to the bus stop to get home if I don't feel like pedaling back.
Just love the wind in my hair and just getting to work feeling great. Riding a bike makes me feel.
Riding makes me feel free. I especially like riding WeCycle in my dresses.
This is just fabulous. Best way to get around town.
I like when there are certain dips in the road and your hair just kind of goes back like this and you get a little wind, you know. It's just that. It's just sort of that breeze. You don't feel that when you're in a car.
using the new bike share that we have in my city, in Chicago.
I really enjoy Recycle because it's a great way to get good exercise.
The ride makes me feel like a kid, makes me feel not so grown up.
It also helps my husband lose 10 pounds.
I would recommend WeCycle to friends and family to get anywhere around town or to and from work.
The reason I joined WeCycle is said, who needs a stationary bike? Why don't I just get this and ride around town? It's a beautiful town.
WeCycle is
Convenient.
easy, fantastic, fast, fun,
Freedom.
mobile.
I'm just happy when I'm on a bike.
Bike share has transformed communities and it's transforming Ashland.
WeCycle on, everybody.
There you have it. Many of you were avid riders throughout the summer, and thanks for being part of this momentum and making our first year a success. And we're looking forward to next year, but first we're all here to answer any of your questions.
So, Mirta, you showed on one of your slides what the busiest day was, which was in June, but did you have a graph in terms of how it looked over the months, and certainly after Labor Day, what that looked like? And so when you're looking for future opportunities and growth, how you're going to perhaps address those ups and downs?
Great question. I don't have a graph to provide you right now, but what we've looked at is that June, July, and August were clearly our busiest months. But we, and I would say across the board, were extremely impressed with our ridership through September and October. September was almost as good as August, and I think that's because there were so many people coming into town on weekends, and there were lots of weddings. A lot of individuals who come with them are familiar with bike share in other communities, and we found that, interestingly, by the fall, September and October, our weekends were less busy than the week, in part because 51% of our riders are locals in our community and aren't using it to get to and from work. So we did see a decrease on the weekends in the fall and the off seasons. Our last day on November 3rd, we had 2 people sign up to use the system that day. So we had more than bikes as people were using them. So it was really encouraging to see that even the shoulder seasons, because that was one of the unknowns of the system, is it just going to be for 3 months while we have all the visitors in town? And it's proven not to be the case, especially with the adoption by the community, with that 75% of our season pass holders being of 81611, 81612 riders.
Yeah, and I wonder also, I always said early on that one of the great opportunities was to capture the guests and locals who live in Snowmass Village who can ride the free bus to Aspen and then hop on the WeCycle to do errands. Do we have any sort of stats or information in terms of, that would be 81615, but also the guests who stay in Snowmass Village?
We had one of the challenges from our system is what you can get at the station. So those who are signing up for a day pass, a 3-day or 7-day, they put in their zip code. If they choose to, then we know a little bit about the demographics there. It looked like we had about 1,600 distinct zip codes from different areas in terms of using our system. 17 countries, if that's what the system showed. We had, I'm not exactly sure the Snowmass statistic, but it was about 6% of our season pass holders were from Basalt. And I would say that is our goal for next year, is to reach out more valley-wide, and that we did not have the capacity in this first year to reach everything. And we did not get Snowmass, either the visitors or the locals, as we had anticipated or wanted. And we were not able to reach the down valley audience, the individuals commuting into the community to work. And we were focused on operating the system, and next year we'll have more bandwidth, and we can start planning now to spread that message.
Yeah, so more opportunities for marketing up in Snowmass to get information out to property management companies and hotels to inform their guests of this opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Essential.
Yeah, Steve?
I rode WeCycle bikes quite a bit, and I think it might be informative if I tell a little bit of my experiences.
Sure.
I thought I would ride it a lot more than I did, but what happened was when I started riding WeCycle, I quit driving my car into town so much. I started riding raft buses a whole lot more, and I started walking around town a whole lot more than I did before, just because in the summertime it's nice walking around town, but I was leaving my car down at the park and ride down the highway instead of driving it into town, largely because of WeCycle. And two of the trips that I took, one fairly frequently was I would park up by the senior center by the hospital, and then I would ride WeCycle down into town, and then I'd take a raptor back up.
Smart man.
You probably carried a lot of bicycles uphill to the hospital. Is that true?
We did.
And that's, it's a nice downhill ride, and it's a harder uphill ride getting back up there. So that would explain part of that. One time when we got out of our commissioners' meeting, and I look at the clock, and I wanted to be at Pepke Park bus stop in about 2 minutes to catch my bus. And I was able to get a WeCycle bike over here by the Rio Grande, get down to Pepke Park and catch my bus.
That's so
Just
great.
because I could get there really quickly on the WeCycle bike. And I only did that once, but the convenience of that was really neat.
Great stories.
A couple of questions. What are you doing for winter storage of the equipment and the bicycles?
So they are in hibernation down valley, and we don't anticipate touching them until we take the system out end of April, beginning of May. So they are at rest. They are in a safe, dry, and safe place.
Yeah, you have it like in a storage unit?
Yep.
Yet you're paying
Exactly.
rent for that?
Exactly.
Okay. And on your expenses, you had 144,000. Are you paying your employees? Is that the biggest expense, or what are how do your expenses break down?
Employees would be the greatest expense, but insurance is a large part of our expenses, as are we have servicing costs for the stations through our provider. We also have cellular connectivity, credit card processing, so those would be kind of the next distribution. This year, marketing made up a large part of our budget, in part because we were trying to get the message out, and I think we would do that more in the future as well. And I would say that would probably be the distribution of our expenses. This year we were able to keep our expenses that low. In part, we had $250 of replacement parts throughout the season, and because the system was brand new, that we were able to keep those costs very low. And the system is remarkable in terms of 8 flat tires all year. I mean, they really are built to be durable. They were expensive to purchase, but there's a reason. It's because they are built so well. And we definitely, being in our first year, we were trying to, knowing our revenues were going to be down, we tried to do everything we possibly could to keep our expenses down. And we weren't able to do exactly everything we had anticipated, so next year we hope to be able to increase our staff capacity and do more.
Other questions or comments?
Good presentation. I mean, really fun fact number stuff. I don't know if it's possible if you could email that to the board, because it'd be fun to have as a reference when people ask about, what did they do for rides? How many calories did they burn?
Yeah, me too.
One question that has been brought up by me a couple of times is this going to be sustainable? Or, was this a level that you projected? And do you see the marketing and user revenue being able to sustain what you want to do going forward?
And I would say enthusiastically, yes. I think this year really proved it, in that we had nothing to show, and we were able to do what we did with really the minimum this year. I think one of our challenges in securing sponsorship was that we didn't have a product to go and say, this is what the bike will look like, and this is where your message will be. And some of the numbers that are not captured in this presentation are the number of people who walked by our bikes, didn't even ride them, but they visually saw them, and so that the sponsorship was viewed in that capacity as well. So we are optimistic that we can increase our sponsorship this year, because we also have, last year we were working until the day we launched on our capital and figuring out how to work the system. We now have the next 5 months to work on securing sponsorship, bringing on more partners, and also communicating to a broader audience using the bikes. Because if we look at that, 285 members of our community were using the bikes on a regular basis, and collectively over 10,000 rides. there's tremendous opportunity to grow that. And that's what I'm most excited about, is that I think we've just touched the surface. The partnership with events was a real eye-opener. The number of rides we can encourage by back and forth with the Institute. The music station was successful this year. So we're going to clearly have to be vigilant. I think we ran a very efficient, and operational efficiency was our priority this summer, and very conservative in our expenditures, and that will continue to be our principle for operating forward. Not without its hiccups, though. However, capital would be another story. So we are not committed to purchasing any new stations unless we can have that funded fully. So purchasing new stations, there have been a lot of requests. Why don't you have one in my neighborhood? I would ride it more if it were here. We will only do that if we can find partnerships and secure the funding to make that happen.
Rachel?
Like others, very impressed. Had no doubts about the program with your full team's enthusiasm and hard work, but it's really great to see the payoff for that, at the end of the day. You guys really very admirable to have, taken a goal and an ideal and a dream and made it into a reality by hook and by crook. It was challenging putting together this capital, so really glad to see our board being a part of that. The two things I would think just to pass along is that the ACRA is probably already developing their summer collateral material now, as well as Snowmass Village, and to the extent you can get a small inset picture or something about it while they're preparing that material. They usually have a transportation page that talks about RAFTA and the services, but that would be great for you to get that out there early. And then the other is that, again, maybe back from my experience with brochure distribution, a long time ago there was a tent card that was done about burning your fireplace on every other day and given to all the lodges and put in the rooms and things like this. I was amazed to find doing deliveries or things like that 3-5 years later, a lot of these places still had the exact same tent card from a one-time distribution. And so you may want to think about that as one of your collateral pieces for the property management companies. It's a one-time to put in the room or put somewhere with their magazines and information, or on the front desk when people check in, how to use WeCycle. And I think you really can capture a lot of guests that way. Really fun.
All right, well, great job this year. One of the things I thought was really interesting from your presentation is first when you showed where Aspen stood in terms of major cities and the success that had. Certainly as the first rural bike share program in the country. And then also your comment about the visitors, and certainly people from the Institute and visiting for the music, that would also incentivize them to become more involved and active utilizing WeCycle programs in their community. So it really broadens out the impact we're having here in Aspen as a model that a small community can be successful in doing this, but also to encourage those who have existing programs in cities to experiment and try it. So I think that in itself is a huge success. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you
making it
for
happen.
all your work supporting this effort.
Very nice.
I'm a big believer in it. I ride them all over the world, and it's great to have one here.
Thank you all. Thank you. See you soon. On bikes or skis, one of the two.
When are we going to have a Wii ski house?
One is kind of impacting. Thank you all. Good luck with the rest of your meeting. And I'll email to you as a board. Does that work? And I'll send the presentation to GR to distribute to all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you, GR, for your support on the program, too.
So, GR, while you're here, you're going to give us a quick update on our underpass
Sure.
project?
Maybe on both the AABC and the underpass, if that's okay.
So I'll start actually with the ABC infrastructure project briefly. We had a very successful construction season. And as I updated the board a couple times, we weren't able to get everything done in the ABC. We had some utility conflicts and other projects that took a little bit longer than we had anticipated. So we'll be having the contractor mobilized back in May, and they'll be able to finish the 200 road. We're actively communicating with everybody out there about when that's going to start, what those expectations are. Through a lot of user feedback, we actually did put a temporary hard surface on the 200 road. It was torn up to get the utilities in the ground, and we put a thin lift of asphalt over the whole thing to make sure that it helped the drainage over the winter, and that it just wasn't a maintenance nightmare with potholes and everything.
And mud.
Yeah. We anticipate those, Concrete Express is the contractor, we anticipate them back in kind of as early in spring as the weather will allow. It's usually around early to mid-May before we can be very productive and everything starts to dry out. So the other thing with the ABC project there is we were able to do some value engineering, and so actually for next year I hope to be able to unencumber some of the funds from the contract and have some significant project savings. I know it's been of interest of the board to make sure that we have a nice and hardy landscaping plan, and we can, once we're through the meat of that construction, we can start looking at making improvements to that. With the underpass project, every day that you drive up and down 82, you get to see our progress. Unfortunately, it's really hard to see a lot of the progress from the highway. As John saw a couple times when we went and did some of the site visits, a lot of the work is happening down off the side of the highway, and you can't see it. We've got trails being built right now that connects the underpass with the existing sidewalks in the ABC. One of the BRT stations is getting close to substantially complete, and the other one, if you're driving up and down Valley, you can see the Up Valley stop is tented right now so that they actually have adequate temperatures to do some of the construction that's required. Just before the WeCycle presentation, I was actually in our weekly meeting with Flatirons Construction, the contractor on the job, and we had a pretty frank conversation about scheduling, and we're working on some issues right now with getting the power to the stations and everything else, but they still anticipate having both the BRT stops and the underpass fully functioning by Christmas. So it's very ambitious, and we're coming up to that point right now. We have missed the last several deadlines that are in the contract, and as per the contract, the contractor has been notified that they can be assessed what's called liquidated damages. It's a little different than a penalty or a fine, but it is money that comes off the contract. For each milestone that's been missed, it's $3,900 a day. At this point, we're in non-attainment of two separate milestones. One pertaining to the underpass and one pertaining to the stations. And so we are going to have our next partnering meeting where we look at these types of big picture issues as opposed to our weekly meetings where we talk more about technical plan issues and submittals and those sorts of things. Next week, to go over how we can keep jumping over these hurdles with what we've had with weather and how to best manage the project.
So, Gio, you said that when you're meeting with Flatirons that you let them know that they can be assessed damages. Shouldn't that be that they are being assessed?
Yes, the clock is running, George. And I'm sorry if
just
my language wasn't sharp enough.
They are being assessed.
Yes.
Not that. Okay. The other question, yes.
Yeah, and what happens with that is a reconciliation at the end to make sure there weren't any other contributing factors or such per the contract. But, yep, we're keeping close track.
And you certainly can't use weather or snow in December as one of those contributing factors.
Well, we should have been done well before now.
Right, right. So. I have another question just regarding the whole project out there, and I've raised it several times. Who is going to be responsible, who is responsible for snow removal for the current raft of bus stations, and when the BRTs become operable and you have the sidewalks, because that's, as you know, that's been a sort of a sore point or pet peeve of mine in the past, having worked out there for many years and having to deal with walking on the roads because you can't walk on the sidewalks, they're not plowed, they're icy, etc.
Well, I'm going to jump back a little bit into a few of the things that we instituted early this winter with the completion of a lot of the pedestrian amenities for the ABC. The way that a lot of the ABC is laid out, where we have the raised sidewalks, our road and bridge department is actually handling snow removal there. It's not to the level, I put it equivalent with our lower service level roads, as in we're going to go and clear the snow off of Brush Creek and Owl Creek and Upper River Road and McLean Flats and our busier roads, and then they'll come back and they've been hitting it with a skid steer usually the day after a storm for those sidewalks. Once you get into the pathways that lead into the pedestrian underpass or up to the BRT stops, and then the BRT stops themselves are all snow melted.
Okay. Rachel?
You know, it's a question for another day and for further out there, but really, should the responsibility for clearing the sidewalks in the Airport Business Center fall to the property owners where the sidewalks are, which is the commonplace practice in cities and municipalities. I'm sure you're familiar with that, Rob. Get out there and clear that ice away from the front of your building. And so it's a conversation for another day to have, you know, because that way the level of service could be the day of the storm, you know, or the morning after, and not have a chance to really solidify into those ice chunks on the sidewalk. So, but that's for another day in discussion with the Airport Business Center management, how that would be allocated towards the many businesses there.
Any other questions for GR? Well, thanks for the update, GR.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our open discussion again.
So we've got two more items from staff, George. One is a quick update. We're going to be bringing the full community survey back to you guys next week, but we had some just check-in on process and language just to see if we're on the right track with you. Pat's here to do that, and then we have the letter from John, whichever you guys want to take first.
Ladies first?
Okay.
I didn't want to say age before beauty.
No, don't say that.
We are currently working on another draft, and I wanted to get a little more feedback from you before committing to what we hope is a final draft that we'll present to you on December 17th. We'd like to have this survey done, like taken and done in results by the time of your retreat in the spring. To help make the survey more of an educational piece, something you brought up, George, we've added narrative to introduce each section of the survey. And please note that the survey is organized, and we didn't bring it before you today because we didn't have time to turn it around and get it redrafted to put in your packet. But each segment of the survey is identified by a core focus area of the strategic plan. So that was sort of an idea that we had to sort of try to create a theme, and then within that theme, at the beginning of each flurry of questions, introduce it with some narrative. I'll just give you an example of one of the narrative pieces that we're working on. A sense of personal safety in Picton County is important to the strategic goal of a livable and supportive community. Programs are in place to protect the community, ranging from law enforcement patrols to emergency management, to social and human services. And then that would be followed by all the questions about ambulance services, walking in neighborhood day and night, child and adult protection services, preparedness for emergencies. So that's sort of the gist, that's the direction we're going in all of the segments of questions. Another thing that we heard you say was you wanted us to make it sound more county and less municipal, and we're working on that. We're using words like economic sustainability instead of economic development, shared use trails instead of paths. We don't call our trails paths. We deleted a question about on-street bicycle lanes. We've added airport questions, caucus questions, broadband, TV, and cell service questions. We've added an explanation to the question about how the county's portion of property tax dollars are spent, explaining in a couple of sentences that the county's portion of the dollars approximately 23%, the remaining 73% going to schools and other governments. So that'll be a little bit of education. We didn't have time to go into each fund, or room to go into each fund, but we thought if we just said that they would be more clear. When asking about large-scale televised events, that was a question that you had some concerns over. We separated out the X Games from Pro Cycle Challenge, since there's two very different large-scale events, so that people can answer the question based on the event. So things like that. One of the things I'd like to clear up from last time, I told you that we would have 1,000 completed surveys. I misspoke. It's 500 completed surveys. We can get a good result, a 95% level of confidence with 500 completed surveys. And with a population of the size that we're going to be dealing with, that's ample, I'm told from the survey people. We have a plus or minus margin of error of 4.3%. So it's 500 completed surveys. I apologize for that misspeaking. So I hope to come back on the 17th with these changes made and have what we're hoping is a final draft, so that we can then turn it around and get it going and have it completed by your retreat.
All right, thanks. Questions? Rachel?
Well, good work. I think you really captured a lot of the things we raised when we saw that real preliminary draft. And I guess the important thing to me would be that the demographics of the 500 really play out, so that, you know, I know that you don't have to capture everyone to be statistically valid, but you have to have a threshold number. And so I don't know if 12 people would give us that for the Crystal River, or whether it's 40. But I just want to make sure we do somewhat demographically capture the population of Pickton County in terms of geographic location.
We're going to try, just the way our population is, you know, there are so many really rural areas, it's hard to get a statistically valid sample, but we'll certainly be able to report by those geographic areas for the results that we get. And we'll just have to note for you when we don't have, in some places, typically you've got to have a minimum of 30 to 40 responses to start to get any confidence level. In some places we just don't have that many people even living. So we'll note that in the responses. But they are committed to do a stratified random sample to make sure that the total response group matches generally our demographics in terms of age and sex and some of those things that surveys really fall down on.
Super.
All right, thanks, Pat. You're welcome. We look forward to seeing us next week. Next.
Next, we have John Ely with a letter, I believe, to Representative Tipton.
This is the letter that the board previously authorized, and George thought after the meeting last week it'd be a good idea to review the contents before it went out.
So you want to start with just giving us a synopsis of the HR 3189, the bill?
HR 3189 is referred to as a Water Rights Protection Act, or Water Rights Ski Area Protection Act. It's been introduced by Representative Tipton, co-sponsored by Representative Polis. I'm not sure of his current sponsorship at this point in time. It was introduced ostensibly to meet a I think it's fairly well characterized as an illegal request by the United States Forest Service to require the operators of the Powderhorn ski area to convey to the United States their water rights associated with the ski area in the issuance, as part of the issuance of their operating permit for the ski area. As a consequence, this bill was introduced. The genesis of the action of the Forest Service, as we went through before, was essentially because the Forest Service views ski areas within the Forest Service as valuable assets for the public, and realizes that a ski area without associated water rights is not inherently viable perhaps not viable at all, given the trends in climate. And so therefore, the representatives of the Forest Service sought to tie the operations of the ski area to the water rights that were developed, held privately by the various operators and other interests that control and own ski area infrastructure, all consistent with Forest Service permits. So the bill was introduced. It would accomplish its stated goal. However, the language of the bill is very broad. And rather than limiting the effect of the bill to merely the Forest Service or even the Department of Agriculture, it applies to all bureaus of the Department of Agriculture and Department of Interior. As a consequence, several communities on the west slope of Colorado became concerned because of the operating permit processes that are undertaken by Bureau of Rec in association with the construction of trans-basin and trans-mountain diversion projects. For example, here in Pitkin County, the Fryark project is subject to a variety of different bypass requirements. In other words, every collection point on the Fryark system has an associated bypass requirement such that the stream segments that are diverted by the Fryark system are not totally swept or totally diverted. These bypass requirements are implemented by the Bureau of Reclamation in association with the Fryark project itself, even though the water rights themselves are controlled by a separate entity, in the Fryark's case, the Southeastern Water Conservancy District. So the concern is that with the broad language as proposed for 3189, the Bureau of Reclamation would not be able to require bypass flows in association with trans-mountain, in particular trans-mountain diversion projects. As a consequence, those bypass flows not being present, it would detrimentally impact stream health for those segments of the creeks and streams that diversion projects are located, as well as the recreation economies that are dependent upon stream flows. And lastly, as mentioned in the proposed language, it would impact Colorado's continued compliance with various compacts, in particular the Colorado Basin compacts, which Colorado is obligated to comply with. So the suggestion made in the letter is to adopt changes within the bill, either consistent with the proposal offered by Summit County or with Senator Udall. Summit County has proposed that rather than structure the bill such that it reads, let's see, any transfer or relinquishment of a water right to merely any transfer of title of a water right. The relinquishment language being the broad, inclusive language that would affect the requirement for a bypass. The suggestion by Senator Udall is to simply have a savings clause within the text of the bill that specifically eliminates any application of this bill to the Bureau of Reclamation in conjunction with permitting trans-mountain or trans-basin diversion projects. Neither suggestion was received warmly, and so the language is as it currently was introduced, in that you have a copy of the bill as it currently exists along with the letter. The offer of Representative Tipton was to include statements within the legislative history of the bill such that it would be clear to anybody examining that history that the intent of the author and the intent of the sponsors was not to suppress the action of Bureau of Reclamation in permitting water diversion projects. However, as the proposed language indicates, that legislative history or legislative intent is rarely referred to absent a case where the legislated language itself contains some inherent ambiguity. If the language is clear on its face, then legislative history will not typically be consulted. And so therefore, the preferred alternative is to make the bill clear that it should not affect the conduct of the Bureau of Reclamation in permitting water diversion projects. That's about it.
So I remember when I asked Representative Tipton about this bill, our concern was that it became a little more broad than the original intent, where it was just going to address the Department of Agriculture. But now, as the bill states, it's also any water right to the United States by the Secretaries of the Interior and the Agriculture. And Representative Tipton said, no, it's just the BLM. But that was probably, he probably misspoke, because it's the entire Interior, which also includes the Bureau of Reclamation as well. Correct. And then when we voiced our concerns about the potential of the requirements for bypass of water with this new bill, again, Representative Tipton said that that is covered. There won't be any changes in requirements for the current bypasses. And what you're saying is, even though that's it's addressed, how did you say, as a
legislative record?
It's on a legislative record. That's probably what he was referring to. That does not necessarily mean that it's actually moved on to, or what's the word I want?
Well, it's not part of the law.
It's not part of the law. So that still remains a concern, that there is a chance that the requirements for the current bypasses could be diminished.
I think the implication actually is quite clear, that the Bureau of Rec cannot require any relinquishment of a water right, the water right being held by a separate entity like a conservation district or another interest holder in the development of a project, or even in the re-permitting of an existing project, would not be, cannot be required by the Department of Interior, and by implication that includes any agency under the Interior, from requiring a relinquishment of those water rights, and therefore a bypass.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, a couple of small things I would add. The very last paragraph, almost the last sentence, these bypass requirements help to preserve stream health here in Pickens County and help to enhance Western Slope Recreational Act, as well as the state's compact compliance responsibilities. We should add the word on the Colorado River, because it's compact compliance with the Colorado River we're concerned about. So I would just add the word, on the Colorado River, or get Colorado River in there somehow.
Well, I didn't specify it simply because all of the basins are subject to interstate compacts within the state of Colorado, and so...
Well, perhaps we say the Colorado River and elsewhere. I mean, that's the biggest compliance issue he has, or we have.
So how would you say?
State's compact compliance responsibilities on the Colorado River and elsewhere, something like that.
Where are you on this letter?
The very bottom of the first page.
Bottom of the first page.
Yeah, bottom of the first paragraph. I mean, the last paragraph, excuse me. So it's the state's compact compliance responsibilities on the Colorado River and elsewhere. Because that's his district. He's the one, I mean, that would be a primary concern from the West Slope folks.
Okay.
Did Steve had to add on that?
Yeah, in relation to that, the thought just occurred to me that because of diverting water from the west slope to the east slope, it probably helps the state meet the Arkansas and the Platte River compacts easier, because they're having more water put into it. And what we want to do is protect the Colorado River compact.
Yeah, I think that might be a byproduct of it, that's a nuance. I don't know that they can take more water if they lost their bypass requirements, but certainly it's a good point. The other is just at the end of the very next paragraph, on the top of the second page. It seems to me there should be some sort of more strong closing sentence, like, continuing with the bill without change could significantly impact the local economy of the frying pan, Roaring Fork Rivers, and your constituents. But we need to say something about the detriment that if it goes forward without change. And then the last kind of comment would be, I think we should say thank you for your assistance in this very important matter. As more of a close. But thank you for your assistance in this matter.
You may, rather than assistance, you may say, thank you for your consideration, or...
Something like that. I mean, I was putting assistance, hoping that we'd get some, but I know what you're saying. But it just should be something other than, just that we should have some sort of clothesline. But further, on the matter as a whole, this was discussed at QQ, and Representative Jared Polis's staff member was there, and she, was kind of apologetic that, they didn't realize the bill was written so broadly, and they thought there was broad consensus about the bill from the ski area reps who brought it into them. And, we had to say, no, you didn't even consult with your county commissioners in your own district. They didn't talk to Summit County or these, and those guys are really concerned with the bypass flows in Lake Dillon and the Blue River and, an awful lot of areas there. But she was saying, well, at least by keeping his name on the bill, he has a chance to amend it from the floor. And so whatever our letter is going out, it should go to Representative Polis as well. And then they said, kind of had a default that, well, and if we can't do it there, at least we have the Senate as our backstop and chance to fix this and move it around. So anyhow, my main comment is I think we should go ahead and send it to QQ as well, so that they have to distribute to their members if we should agree to send it, and then definitely to Polis's and the Jets and these other offices, so that they have an idea of what our concerns were with this bill. Because the Colorado delegation caucuses once a week in D.C. to try to talk about what they're all supporting and what they can agree on, and so the more we make sure everyone realizes there's concerns. I don't know if you want to tie it in or have a paragraph or a subparagraph or something about the Colorado statewide water plan, but to me, with this hanging over our heads and the whole discussion about new supply and how do we accomplish new supply and what would the basin of origin want with new supply, becomes kind of moot if the federal agencies that are going to regulate either the reuse or enhancement of their existing reservoirs or any sort of new diversion can't require bypass flows. Then you're literally just taking everything out from underneath those discussions, and that this bill itself could grind the statewide water plan efforts to a halt, because there's no surety in the federal permitting process about protecting west slope flows. So that may be too much to want to get into it, but I do definitely see it as a damper.
Rob?
I agree with Rachel that this should be written to all the co-authors of this, or the other people that are signed on this, Bishop, Paulus, and the others, in terms of all of them. There are a couple little language things that I'm not opposed to writing this letter, because I do think that, Scott Tipton potentially misspoke in his explanation and thinking about the other bill that he had passed too, and in his defense when he was defending this to us. But it'd be nice to clarify that conversation with him versus just writing him a letter saying, we disagree with what you said, and because he did try to defend his position that it didn't affect this. It seems to me like we owe him a little bit of respect as our congressman to say, please clarify what you said, because we still have concerns. In the first paragraph you said, so that's one general broad thought. In the first paragraph you said, we're confident that such extraction would not be held up in court, and this refers to not being in favor of the bill in general and its basis, because if the Forest Service were to try to take the water rights away from the ski company, for instance, it wouldn't hold up in court. But I don't think anybody here, even you, Johnny, really can be presumptuous to what the courts are going to do. So I think in general this is a good bill in terms of protecting the water rights of ski companies around Colorado. So I I get it, it's a long shot, but it is a bill that protects those rights for the future economic viability for ski resorts. So that language, to me, I think we should focus on the part of the bill with the diversion stuff, as opposed to focus on the part of the bill in that first paragraph that talks about the fact that the essence of this bill is a bad bill. Because in my opinion, the essence of this bill is a good bill, which protects the water rights of ski companies.
Well, I put that we basically agree with the concept of not requiring a conveyance of water rights, private property interest as a condition of an operating permit.
But the next sentence is, but we don't need it.
Well, the reference to that simply is a reference to a United States District Court case that was decided last year, which struck down the very same attempt that was done previously.
But
I mean, all Parliament would have to do is say, here's that decision, back off, and that's pretty much what would happen.
But I think you would agree, in defending something in court, any piece of leverage that you have is better. You're better off. So they're better off with this bill than not with this bill for that portion of it.
No, I agree. It's sort of, to be honest with you, it just makes me wonder what the real genesis of the thing is. If the immediate concern was a protection that's already been addressed in court, and yet the bill was a year after that decision, that makes you wonder. But we can delete all that if you would rather.
That's the board can discuss after that, but let me get to the next one. The next one.
Can we cover that one though before you go on?
Sure.
I mean, it just might make it easier than going backwards again. My understanding was the 2012 case was really thrown out on procedural grounds, that there were not enough public comments and public hearings about the Forest Service new rule.
That was part of it.
Okay, but
But they also found that it was a taking.
Okay, I really haven't heard him discuss that, but I've always heard the procedural part. But, the other side of that, and I don't know if you're expressing it in a way I'm not understanding, Rob, or not, but I think the Forest Service concern has been that you're going to have these small level operator ski areas that may, as they have been in Europe, been having enough trouble getting enough snow with climate change over time, that they sell their water rights eastward. And so if it's a Sol Vista or some of these other areas that you don't think of as big money, Eldora or, a Ski Sunlight, that says, hey, at the end of the day, this is going to be a summer resort. We're not going to use the ski infrastructure anymore. We've been struggling, and we're going to sell the water to be diverted at the top of Eisenhower Tunnel now instead of down here. How many other communities would be stripped of that use and reuse of the water coming forward? So, that's the concern I'm hearing from other small ski towns and so on, is that, wait a second, this isn't necessarily a bill that preserves skiing and recreation in our community. This is a bill that creates the ability to sell your water rights anywhere else in the state at whatever time your resort is no longer economically viable. And or it's more valuable for its water than it is for its activity, just like farms on the Front Range. And so this bill really pushes that forward, that it's, it doesn't matter how many small shops have built up or infrastructure your city has invested in being a resort tourist area. If your tourist operator decides to parcel off and sell his assets and sell his water westward, no one else is ever going to be able to reactivate that ski area permit. They're not going to be able to do it because there's no water left. So this bill enables that to happen.
And it enables that because it protects the personal property rights that those ski areas went out on their own and bought those.
Well, no, some of the rights, I agree, again, with the rights that they may have developed separately off of private property or obtained, but if it was water rights development that the Forest Service allowed them to develop off the Forest Service lands and to use as Forest Service waters, they're kind of taking something that was granted them as part of the permit, letting the permit go to fallow, but then, extracting the valuable components of that permit, which were the water rights off of the federal lands to sell.
And I don't know what restrictions there are on those water rights, or that's a whole nother dive in to find out exactly whether or not those water rights can be.
I want to make sure you realize that there's a double-edged sword.
At this point in time, the Forest Service has already admitted that there were a heck of a lot better ways to do this than what was attempted.
Right.
Okay. Well, you have any other comments, Rob?
Well, the other comment is just a language thing, which it says this broad language is of particular concern to Pickens County and other western Colorado headwater communities. I don't think we can speak for other communities. We speak for Pickens County. We don't speak for other communities. That's just in general, I can't tell you what Mesa County wants. I'm not a policymaker for Mesa County.
As I know, they support it.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with this, as the way it's stated.
Yeah, I mean, QQ members, some are on one side and some are on the other.
But they write their own letters.
Yeah, they do.
Our letter is from Pickens County. I'm not going to presume to be a policymaker for other counties.
Well, we could say some other West Slope communities, but I want to make it sure that we're not standing alone on this, because we already have heard from Summit County, we've heard from a number of other communities. I don't know that we need to reference all those who have different concerns, but I can see adding the word some, and some other West Slope communities. I don't know if we need to, but.
The bill itself sort of set up a dichotomy of support and opposition between individuals or entities that saw it as a good way to protect private property rights versus communities, particularly along the headwaters of the West Slope, who saw it as a problem when dealing with water diversion projects.
I mean, this is an opportunity for us to provide feedback to Representative Tipton on this bill and some of our concerns, and it also will go to the rest of the congressional delegates, so everyone is aware of these concerns. And I think that's stated. It's not saying that we oppose the bill. It's not saying that we support the bill, but these are the concerns that we have, and I think it's stated correctly here. We can make a few minor adjustments. Rachel's comments in terms of the language referring to Colorado River and other areas. If you want, we can add broad language. It's a particular concern to Pickens County and some other Western Slope Colorado headwater communities, because there certainly is. But other than that, I'm comfortable with this. Steve?
I was wondering if we would want to copy Senators Udall and Bennett on this letter also.
Well, it's going to go to our congressional delegates, all of our congressional.
Well, that was a question I had. Oh, and another edit, George. I was going to delete the sentence that Rob was talking about in the first paragraph, referring to court action in the district court case.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, because that's not as relevant to the bill per se.
Right. And the other question, the question I had for the board is, in sending, do you want to send this board this letter as a CC to other members of the delegation, particularly Polis and Udall, who have weighed in on the bill, or do you want to generate a unique letter?
I think we can just CC this on.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we need a separate letter.
And do you want it to the entire delegation, or just Polis and Udall because they've been involved?
I would send to the entire delegation.
Okay.
There's no harm in that.
No, not at all. Right.
So we'll add some wording, we'll delete that one sentence in the first paragraph. And
then the suggestion I had on the second page about strengthening, it could say continuing the bill without change would or could significantly impact your constituents in the Roaring Fork Valley and our economies. I mean, that just, we need to bring it down to local issue, local concern.
yeah, certainly. Anything else? Okay, thanks, John. Good work. Where are we? We've got anything else for open discussion?
Yeah, just a reminder that our holiday party is this Friday. It bumps from 6 to 10.
Okay, board, any open discussion? Steve?
Just quick for your information, the Nordic Council held an emergency meeting last week, and it has to do with an event that's going to take place on January 11th, and so I thought I could give a really quick update. on what we discussed, because if I tell you on January 7th, the event's almost there. There will be a fat tire bicycle race held as part of winter school, and the ACRA asked to have that on the Thomas More open space land, which is city open space land. It's going to be a fat tire bicycle race on the open space land, and a lot of the Nordic Council discussion had to do with having a fat tires being on a Nordic trail, and so the plan is to do a separate trail outside of the Nordic ski trail, and it will be groomed by the Nordic Council equipment. The extra cost will be paid for by ACRA, and then that trail will be kept open for the rest of the winter for walkers and dog walkers and fat tire bicyclers to use that outside trail to keep them, hopefully keep them off of the Nordic trail, which is apparently on that part especially is getting trashed a lot just by people walking their dogs on it. And so that's the hope, to have the dual trail around there and have it serve, to divert that kind of traffic off the Nordic trail. But you will be hearing publicity about that fat tire bike race as part of winter school, and that's where it's going to be. It's not going to be on any county open space land. And the Nordic Council's approval was for a 1-year trial basis, not for future years.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I have a problem with the process. The Nordic Council is not the decisive authority in what happens on the Nordic trails. This particular parcel, the road, is actually on city-owned property, so my sense is it should have needed to go before the city open space and trails for that final decision. If it were on a county portion of the trail system, it would need to go before the county open space and trails. The Nordic Council is an advisory advocacy group that answers to the city and the county's open space and trails, who in turn answer to the elected officials. So the process was flawed, and to assume that the ACRA can go to the Nordic Council and get an approval without going through those steps, I think it's flawed. And I think it's a dangerous precedent for other organizations that may want to do the same thing. So the Nordic Council needs to be apprised of that, and those decisions cannot be final by the Nordic Council. At least that's what I believe.
Yeah, it was discussed that we gave our approval, but that it needed to be, it was mentioned, it needed to be approved by the Aspen Open Space and Trails Board, and possibly by the City Council also. That was realized that they're the ultimate decision-making authority there.
But is that going to happen, or is it sort of fait accompli?
Well, yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, that's a concern of mine.
Yeah.
Just for point of reference. Right?
And there's usually concerns like some of ours. We just did one last week where we got a conservation easement to use a little section of that trail. It might not include biking on things like that, so those things need to be checked out.
Well, the license agreement.
Yeah, the license agreement to use those properties might be specifically for cross-country ski trails.
Well, part of our discussion was on a lot of the private land with this skiing easement over it excludes any other use besides Nordic skiing or snowshoeing. So that was part of the discussion, that this isn't on any of that private land. It's only on the city open space land and limited to that.
Yeah, I just think it's important that as our representative, that you have to sort of keep the Nordic Council in sync in terms of what their role is. And I did that when I was on the Nordic Council. I had to keep reminding them that, we're an advocacy group, we're not a decision-making group. And sometimes they forget that, and I think that's...
And I did bring that up because we had talked about that before.
so anyway.
Yeah, the thing to me would just be how important is the signage, because there's a certain point on any time when people are in the backcountry or on a trail where it's like, hey, why don't we just go walk over there? Or why don't we go ride over there for a little bit? And, you know, I don't know what the signage is going to be to say this is the cross-country trail, this is the dog walk bicycle trail. And will we, you know, by default start really encouraging people to ride all the trails, you know, beyond this here? But, you know, one-year experiment's fine. I just think it's real important that they have signage, you know, as you enter and the different points at which you can enter that trail system. Because the race is one thing, people will be there, it'll be managed. After the fact, it's hard to say if it'll be managed.
Okay, good, thanks.
Very good, yeah.
Anything else? Open discussion? With that, we're due for a break, and we're back here at 3:30 for a citizen vote interview. Grassroots, we're taking a break. Back at 3:30.
And George, I'm going to skip the citizen board interview in a few minutes. I'm going to do an interview with public radio.
Is Michael Oslo still on the board, isn't he?
Yes, he's not here today.
Okay. I grew up with his daughter.
Oh, you did?
Okay. So of the only person that I knew that I felt comfortable with, he's not here.
We don't bite.
I'm
Okay.
you on grassroots.
Grassroots?
Yeah.
Well, we're on to a citizen board interview. Shannon Miller is here, applying for the Reed Advisory Board. So welcome, Shannon, and thank you for applying. The process we use is we just go around and ask you a few questions, just to get a better understanding of why you want to be on the board and your background, et cetera. Rachel?
Sure. Well, thank you for applying. We greatly appreciate that. And I noted from your application that you're planning to move to Redstone at some point, that area. And so will the travel commitment to come up for board meetings be an impediment for you?
No, I work for SKICO in the winter, so I'm used to the travel. And we're actually closing next Thursday, so.
Oh, good.
From Aspen to Redstone, yeah. It's been a 7-month process, so I'm ready.
Okay.
But yeah, travel doesn't bother me at all.
Rob?
Tell us a little bit about why this board interests you.
Well, so my background's in natural resource management. I managed a farm for a long time, so I understand the impacts of invasive species. I also worked with Weld County's weed division for 2 years, so I have a lot of experience, and I think being part of the community and helping out is important, and this is probably something that I'm most passionate about, and that I see areas of Pickens County that we could probably use a little bit more local weed control, and yeah. We're headwaters, and I think it's important for the rest of the state as a headwater county to really control our problem so that it doesn't spread on through the system, so.
So let me just piggyback off of that. So as a board member, how do you see the ability to address some of these problems?
Well, first, the Weed Advisory Board somewhat has budgeting. Like, explain more of what my position is on the Weed Advisory Board, or what the board has the ability to do. Can you explain that to me? Because there wasn't really a lot of explanation in the...
I'll let Steve explain that to
Okay.
you. He served on the board.
Yeah, a lot of what the Weed Advisory Board does is just public outreach.
Okay.
Holding, events will be held where we'll be present, and answering people's questions and handing out literature. I did a lot of, I call them weed walks on people's property just to help them identify noxious weeds. And different board members would also do that.
Okay.
So most of it is a public education thing, and holding several events a year where they're like weed pulling events. So.
And then do they like to do booze at Arbor Day and things like that, just for knowledge for the public and education, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well then, definitely, I would say that my position in Weld County was mostly landowner education. So identifying weeds for them, letting them know what they can do for control, why it's important that we control weeds. So I think my background definitely speaks to that, and what I'd be able to do. We set up a couple cool programs where we would actually gel weeds like thistles in flower and thistles not in flower, just to help with identification, and just had those around for people at different events. Like up here it'd be like Arbor Day or R Day or something like that, so that people could see what they had, be able to see the flower not in a picture but in an actual like form. And so yeah, as far as education, I think it's very important. So.
Good, thank you. Steve?
Well, thank you for applying for the board. They have been shorthanded, and well, it's greatly appreciated on any of our boards having citizens apply. We do have different weeds here to some extent than are in Weld County, and I don't know how familiar you are with listed species in the state, but in Pickens County, there's over probably close to 30 of the species on the state list are present in various locations in Pickens County.
I mean, I'm obviously familiar with like both the A and the B list for the state. And so as far as identifying and spotting them and things like that, I'm incredibly comfortable just because I've done it, and then my background in natural resources and stuff. Like I know up here where you guys have Canada, because everywhere has Canada thistle, and then you have all the toadflax. And you guys have more yellow toadflax up here than, or Dalmatian.
There's also Dalmatian
There's
toadflax
Dalmatian.
in a couple of locations. Mostly yellow toadflax, though.
Yeah. So, yeah, I see it around. We have a lot of houndstone in Pickens County. Look at me being nerdy about weeds.
Rachel?
When you were in Weld County, did you work with the CU Extension agent?
We did. We worked a little bit with the CSU extension agent for Weld County. A little bit. We more worked with Colorado State University and their invasive species professors, and we looked at a lot of the research that they were doing for control and both organic and non-organic controls. So working with moving in different species to choke out weeds, and then also chemical controls and stuff like that. I also worked a lot with Division of Wildlife, with their properties that we had in the county. We don't have any federal forest lands. We had Pawnee Buttes, so we do have that forest, but the only really invasive that we had there was absinthe wormwood, and so we did some of that control with them, but federally I didn't work as much as I did with the state offices. But
Yeah, I was just wondering, because we've been reestablishing a relationship on a part-time basis with CU, and that's one of the advantages of their expertise, and I just think you'd bring a lot of experience to the board. Really appreciate you applying.
Thank you. Jeff Piper was he the CSU extension agent that was
This
hired?
summer?
Do you guys know?
I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Do you know Phyllis?
We met him once, but I don't remember the name, and I was kind of thinking we were going to have a year-end report or something, because we're considering funding it again in next year's budget.
We're actually sharing him with Eagle County.
Yeah.
So if he's with Eagle County, he would be ours.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who they finally hired, because I applied for that position, so I kind of followed it. And I actually know him through a friend, because he went to University of Colorado and was friends with a friend that I have from here. So I know him. He's an amazing individual.
Yeah.
He's definitely an asset. Keep him.
Steve?
Two questions. What's your personal philosophy about using herbicides for spraying weeds versus doing integrated pest management and things with pulling and organic kind of things, that sort of thing?
I think it really depends on the species. And definitely the extent of the invasion on a particular property. Some species are very easy, and also, how likely they are to spread and impact the environment. So some species that are difficult to kill, difficult to control by pulling, or, I think it's really cool to use alfalfa to choke out Canada thistle and things like that. So I definitely like the organic options, but I also know that chemicals, if used properly and controlled correctly and sprayed by the right person in the right amounts, are beneficial. And I think that being able to use organic options and non-organic options, and especially for whatever the landowner is or the use of the property is, what's most appropriate for that specific situation. So
And
it depends.
last question, want to make sure that you're able to attend meetings, which right now they're like one Thursday a month at 10 o'clock at the Public Works building by the airport. And would you have any problem making that meeting?
Nope.
Or the once a month?
Nope. I patrol for SKICO in the winter, so I actually have Thursdays off, and I did that specifically thinking that if I got this, then I would be able to do that. And if I didn't have Thursdays off, I already cleared with my patrol directors that this might be likely and that I would need Thursdays off, so it's not a problem.
Great.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
thank you very much for applying again. The process is we'll have opportunity to discuss this amongst ourselves in the next week or so, and hopefully get back to you shortly.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay, we're a little ahead of ourselves, not by much. Do we have, we're going to do some telecommunications on this for the abatements, or?
For mine, yes. Yeah. My petition should be showing up.
5 minutes.
Let's take a 5-minute break, grassroots.
Yeah, we gotta get the tape going and everything too.
Grassroots. I'm going to call to order a special meeting for the purpose of abatement hearings, and we're going to start with Stuart Rosenberg's appeal, and Danny Popish is here to present. And you've explained to Stuart in terms of the process, or have you explained the process?
Well, in a general sense that
so
we let the taxpayer go first, and then there's a question and answer, and then we'll go on to question and answer.
Actually, in the past, I think it's just been the opposite, but I think...
We've seen it either way, it doesn't matter.
Well, let's have the assessors go first, then the board will have the opportunity to ask any questions at the end, and then we'll have Stuart go. If there are any questions for Stuart, the board could have an opportunity to ask.
Sure.
And then we'll bring it back to the board.
And we need to open a special meeting.
I just did.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
You missed it, so yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing we'd like to refer to is if you guys received the packet that we sent out, and it contains a little bit of a synopsis, our comp sale grid, and the listing of the property. I also, if you guys don't mind, just have some maps just to orient you with the property and the comparables there. Thank you.
Do I need to set for the natural one?
Sure.
3 minutes? Okay.
Yes. So the property is Unit 402 located in the Lower Shadowbrook. And if you want to refer your packets to page 4, kind of at the bottom, gives us a little synopsis of what we went through. Went through the process of protest, and then petitioner filed for arbitration here. And so our method was using the standard comp sale grid that we usually do. The data collection period is from mid-08 to mid-2010, so this is for values of the years 2011 and 2012. And so our best comparables that we found for this property were right next to the complex of the Lower Shadowbrook and the Stonebridge. They had 2 sales, Unit 625 for $1.3 million and Unit 610 for $1.7 million. So we used those 2 sales as our most weighted comparables, and then we also threw in 2 other sales that we'll refer to in our comp sale grid on page 5. And so the value of the property came in at $1,282,400, and after discussing a few phone calls with the petitioner, we decided to go in and get an inspection of the property. And so what my recommendation was to lower the quality of the property, of the subject property, from excellent rating 6 to a quality rating very good. So lower it down a notch from a 6 to a 5. And so it changed the value just a little bit, but we felt that that was a little more appropriate for the condition and quality of the property. And so on page 5 in your packet, if there's any questions that you have about our adjustments, the comparable sale grid shows the subject property on the far left, and then 4 comparables that we felt were the closest to this property. So the first 2 would be the 2 Stonebridge units, with the first one being very minimal adjustments, really close in size and location and quality. And then the second Stonebridge, fairly close as well. The Crestwood Comp 3, I believe the petitioner also used that for his comparable. And then comparable 4, again, it's a little bit weaker, but it's a slope side condo similar to the Lower Shadowbrooks. It's just up the hill there on Fanny Hill. And so if you have any questions on, I do have some photos of the first comparable too, if you'd like to see those. And then after our comp sale grid, we show a map of the properties subject, comparable 1, or sale 1, sale 2, right next to it, sale 3 right across the slope, and then sale 4 just up the slope. And then finally in your packet, starting on page 7, you'll see the listing of this property during the time frame. The appraisal date of 6/30/2010, it was currently listed for $2.499 million.
Did it actually sell during that time period?
No. But as you know, the state of Colorado is having most fee appraisers do, taking into consideration listing prices at that time. So we can consider it, but again, I didn't really, you know, put too much weight on it since you can list.
For any price?
Right, virtually.
So I'm sorry, Dan, there is some sort of standard through the state regulations of this to take into account the listing price?
Well, for
people can list it for whatever.
Sure.
You could list it for $20 million if you wanted to, but
Right.
you couldn't use that as a comp for
Exactly.
a property
Right.
next door.
But they're saying, realtors probably wouldn't want to be wasting their time shooting,
I don't know about that.
Well, exactly, but they would probably say, what do we think we can get close to reaching for, and then, like most fee appraisers do, that put in, they use in their comparables listings, and then, drop it down a 10 or 20% decrease or so when they use it for their comparables.
But I guess specifically to my question, there's a set standard of guidelines as to what you can use for interpreting your valuation.
We use
what is the language in terms that allows you to use a listing price?
Yeah. Maybe I can address that.
Yeah.
I'm the chief appraiser at the county assessment office, and I think what Dan is saying is that what we find in fee appraisals that come through now, after the downturn, is that typically lenders are requiring, in addition to actual sales, they are requiring 1 or 2 comparable listings in the market as validation of, in other words, if the sales point to one number after the adjustments, but there are listings of comparable properties in the same area that are targeted to a vastly different number, then a flag goes up as to the conclusion that the appraiser came to. And so lenders are requesting appraisers, and George, maybe you can speak to this too through business practice.
So I guess you're talking about lenders, but that doesn't govern your job as an appraiser for assessment value.
Correct. So we have relied on the actual sales as the basis of our value. The listing is there as a reality check.
Especially since it was the subject, not another comparable listing.
How do we typically, when we do our evaluation, typically how we use listings is they are our gauge of the upper threshold of value, because nobody's going to pay more for a property than what somebody's trying to ask for.
Okay.
So how we typically use that when we do the revaluation is to say, okay, here are all of our sales, and then when we get our finished values, we go back and plot the listings. If our finished values are coming in higher than what people are trying to sell them for, then that's our clue that we need to recalibrate and adjust our values so that we're coming in less than what people are trying to sell them for.
And that makes sense to use it as a ceiling, but not as a floor.
Correct.
Yeah.
But, so in a case like this, where our value is essentially 50% of what the property was listed for, that shows that if anything, we're conservative relative to at least what the owner was hoping to achieve with the sale.
Then this is a top floor unit. Consider slope side.
Yeah.
What would you say for views? Great views?
Yes, and in your packet, if you see the listing, there's photos of the subject property. You guys have the listing. The views are basically right out at Fanny Hill, and so in their listing, so they have a photo of the deck, and you're basically getting all of Snowmass Mountain right in front of you. The pool to the complex of Lower Shadowbrook and the ski lift right there. So, I mean, it could be up for debate on whether you have expansive views, but it's basically the whole
So,
scheme.
but when you look at comparables, or when the appellant will discuss his comparables, one being the Tamarack, which is not slope side, which does not have views, which is actually impaired severely by Bays Village, you take all that into account.
Correct. Tamarack was one that I believe the petitioner wanted to use, and I discussed with him saying, being on the other side of Snowmelt Road, kind of down there in that pocket, being obstructed by Bays Village, we've got, 2 or 3 other comparables pretty close to our subject already. And so, there were 49 condo sales in Snowmass Village during the time frame here. And so if we're able to get 3 or 4 good comps, that's what we'll use.
Okay. Any other questions for Danny? Steve?
What are your rating for the quality of the construction or the maintenance? Is it excellent, very good, good, and?
It actually goes
What are the
on a 1 to 7 scale. And so, yeah, the average is a 30, 40 is a good, 50 is a very good, 60 is the excellent, and 70 is superior. And that's pertaining to your complex. So if it's very good within the Shadowbrook or within the Stonebridge or the Crestwood, so forth, that's how we rate them compared to the other units. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Dan at this point? Mr. Groenberg?
Hi, thank you for allowing me to come here and experience this process. I'm not as prepared as the property appraiser's offices. They're much more fluent in the language and the way they go about their business, so I'm really doing this as my own representation as a layperson, so bear with me. The comps that I put out there, the Crestwood, and basically I pulled my information off of, I guess you have your sheet of the Snowmass Village condo sales. Is this the one that they have?
That's just provided on our website. I don't think is it?
I was provided this off the property appraiser's website, a number of sales during that time period, and
I don't think we have that page, so I can't reference it.
so I think it's actually encompassed in whatever you do have. This is basically it's a 2-page thing off of what I was told to gather my information from.
I'm just not sure that that was included with the abatement form that you submitted. I can run a copy real quick.
Yeah. Or this one, it's basically all a
I
list.
think it's everything that's in there.
Yeah, the 49, basically all 49 Snowmass Village condo sales in that mid-08 to mid-2010 period.
So I extrapolated what I thought was subdivisions comparable to the Crestwood, I'm sorry, comparable to the Shadowbrook where I live. And to me, whether you're right next door to the Shadowbrook or on